So, hey Internet, where you been, man? Let's go. This is The Modern Christian Philosopher's God Does Not Exist, Part 2. Previously, we covered the issues of, who created God, what's the more likely ultimate metaphysical context that explains the existence of our universe without needing itself being explained. We covered the logical problem of evil, and how can a god avoid being ultimately responsible for everything if people only do what they want, and what they want has been predetermined by either magic or mechanics. So we're going to move on to other issues of similar nature that show that the modern Christian philosopher's God is logically impossible in multiple ways, hinged on philosophically myopic Christian tradition servicing hopelessly confused metaphysical concepts, and isn't representative of the biblical God in any event. So this is a pretty big issue. How can a timeless God, a God who is above and beyond time, outside of time, have actual mental states? It's kind of a problem. All gods have to have minds to be considered gods. All minds must be able to have actual mental states to be properly considered minds. Gods who are outside of time cannot have mental states, since having a mental state requires, at bare minimum, the ability to change from one state of being to another, to have an experience, to think a thought, have a feeling, etc. Static minds are not minds, they're statues. Timeless God is therefore not a mind, and therefore not a God. So you've outgodded yourself. Time is an asset. Time is an enabler. Time allows a God to actually do things. And without time, it's just a frozen state of being that has no mental qualities whatsoever. So, a timeless God is not a God. And then, how can a timeless God create anything metaphysically contingent? Contingency is a huge thing for a lot of modern Christian philosophy. However, the past cannot exist, the past cannot exist and also exists simultaneously from an atemporal God's eye view, and therefore all moments of a timeline would be equally real. Basically, the God's eye view is he sees everything from beginning to end, and with A theory versus B theory of time, A theory is that the present is the only thing that's real, the past isn't real, the future isn't real. B theory is what modern physics actually uses, that's what science actually uses. So if you think your religion's compatible with science and you're using A theory of time, you're wrong. Physics uses B theory, and you need to consider this very strongly because it refutes a lot of modern Christian philosophical arguments. So if all moments of a supposedly created timeline are real to a timeless God, there was never a time when the entire created timeline of a universe, a four-dimensional object, didn't exist. Atemporal gods never begin to do anything. The creator and created would be co-eternal. If there was never a time when the creation didn't exist, it was not created. A timeless God cannot create anything. Because you look at everything from the God's eye view, the entire universe exists from beginning to maybe never end. And you can't roll the clock back to a time when there was just a God and no universe. They were both there. It is just as meaningless to say that the universe created God as it is the God created the universe. Everything's a brute fact. Everything that exists isn't contingent. There's no such thing as contingency. Contingency is an illusion, ultimately. And so with B theory of time, with everything being co-eternal, that flattens the whole creator-created dynamic. And so how can a God, or anything at all, be non-physical? Disembodied properties fit the exact definition of non-existent things, having no concrete dimensionality or location, ability to affect anything, etc., and are therefore non-existent. A non-physical God is an arbitrary collection of disembodied properties and therefore non-existent. You're literally describing something that just can't exist. If you try to over-define non-existence, you're describing disembodied properties. I have no idea what you're talking about. I would never in a million years have come up with the idea of a disembodied property on my own. I only have thought about that as a result of other people thinking these things are real. Um, and just like a singularity, people describe a singularity as having no height, length, width, or depth, having no height, length, width, or depth, or location. And you're literally describing nothing. And a disembodied property has the exact same properties, the exact same non-properties. And so anything that's non-physical, to me, you're just explaining non-existence. And at best, it's an unproven category of existence. And there's no way to go further with the debate. Like, there's no means of investigation. You can't go out and look for non-physical things. If the experience of properties isn't enough for you, there's no further evidence that's ever going to prove anything about it. It's just that instance of it seems like it is non-physical. And that's it. That's the entire argument. And everything else points in the exact opposite direction, that these are just non-things. And there's no reason for it. There's just structure and mental states that are physical, ultimately. So, another issue, how does an unmoved mover move anything? If an unmoved mover may be said to simply have the arbitrary property of being able to move things, then why is it that all moving things must have a mover? Why not an unmoved moving thing, or a self-moving thing? We have a moving universe, so to speak, probably a multiverse, and we don't know more than that. I mean, you don't know that that's not an arbitrary property of the universe. You're just going to create a thing with arbitrary properties, like an arbitrary God that is an unmoved mover. I mean, just slap properties on things. But we have a universe, inferring more universes. Like, obviously a universe can exist, we have one. Why not another one? Why not an infinite multiverse? That at least we know could exist. It's not a speculation of like, well, we have universes, we could have more universes that are slightly different. But in terms of an unmoved mover, you're not explaining anything. I think I'm going to stop it there, because next topics are ontological arguments, and how I think that there are atheistic arguments, specifically Max Tegmark's Ultimate Ensemble Universe, that is a competitor ontological argument. You're probably not going to find many atheists or anybody at all other than theists making any ontological arguments. Ontological arguments are themselves speculative arguments. They're forms of arguments that have never been proven to yield correct results. Like deductive arguments, you can make a simple deductive argument and go check to see if you're right about it, and go, it's like, okay, yeah, I made this deductive argument and it was true. I went and checked.